Welcome to the Bassline. Steve Bennett is an artist and an IT expert who has taken on the task of doing linguistic forensics to examine obituaries. This unique work may prove to be groundbreaking as we continue to go about the process of proving that COVID injections have done enormous harm across both national and global populations. I'm very pleased to introduce the inquisitive Steve Bennett to the Bassline. Good afternoon, Steve. How are you today? How's the weather in Missouri?
Good afternoon, Jeremiah. It's a great day here. We had a little light rain this morning, which is actually kind of welcome, but it's nice here. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Sounds great. So let me make a couple of announcements before we get into our incredible conversation today. First of all, hopefully you already have the date saved on your calendars, but our next 528 Frequency Jam is going to be on Sunday, October 26th. Same time, same place. That is 3:30 p.m. at Rock Mill Fitness. The address there is 274 Lenox Avenue. It's just south of the 125th Street train station on 125th and Lenox. If you take the 2 or the 3 there, you just walk barely down the block and you're right there at the lovely location, which is Rock Mill Fitness, 274 Lenox Avenue. So please save the date. We're building up that venue. We're building up the jam session. We want it to be a place where folks can really get together and connect in the flesh in this world in which too many of our interactions are digital or virtual or whatever. So, yeah, October 26th, that's the next 528 Frequency Jam. Also, please check out my Substack. If you are not a subscriber to my Substack, please fix that today. I've been working really hard, as you know, producing this program, writing articles every month, hosting Stop the Shots on X, and I would love to feel that resounding support in the form of you subscribing to my Substack. If you can be a paid subscriber, that is truly a blessing, and I really appreciate that. If you can't be a paid subscriber at this time, please just subscribe for free. It doesn't require entering a bunch of parameters. You just enter your email right there in the center of the page. In any one of my articles, you can just enter your email in the center towards the top of the page, and you are subscribed just like that through entering your email. So yeah, check me out, Jeremiah Hosea on Substack, JEREMIAHHOSEA. And of course, you can support this program additionally by going to jeremiahhosea.com. Again, that's JEREMIAHHOSEA.com. Buy the theme song to this show, Love's the Highest Truth. There's an incredible guitar solo that we don't get to hear in the intro segment of the show because we want to, get right into our programming. But if you let the song play on, then you can hear an incredible guitar solo by Ryan Waters, who is actually the first ever guest on the Bassline and is the lead guitar player for Sade. So, yeah, please check out that song and any number of other original pieces of music over there at jeremiahhosea.com. You can also schedule a chess lesson for you and your loved ones, and that can be done easily. You can reach out to me at remotelearningchess.com. I am the founder of remotelearningchess.com. Also, we have our nightly Stop the Shot spaces. So if you are not on X, please make an X account just to join Stop the Shots. If you participate in our nightly spaces, that's even better. But even if you never participate, sign what I call the living petition by becoming a member of the Stop the Shots community. We have incredible guests who stop into the space. We have an incredible community of people from all different backgrounds sharing ideas, observations, and we'd love for you to join us in that community. And what else? One last thing is the Bassline has been uploaded onto YouTube, which really feels great. It feels great for a number of reasons. First of all, a friend of mine is helping me with this. They sort of swooped in like a guardian angel, and they're helping to get all of that content uploaded, which is a huge blessing. And they're uploading awesome photos, which just feels really cool to see the faces of guests. I hope that attracts people to the interviews, just to see the variety of different people that I've interviewed. So open up your YouTube right now as you're listening and type in at the Bassline podcast, and it will pop right up. And almost all the episodes have been uploaded. I think they only allow 10 uploads per day, so we're just pouring them in there, and we'll be done pretty soon. But in the meantime, there are a bunch of episodes already uploaded, and please go and individually like all of them. First of all, subscribe to the channel and just share those abundantly. I'd really, really appreciate it. We have accumulated a treasure trove of interviews at this point, and the information is more relevant than ever. I insist on that. So again, it's at the Bassline, and remember, in this case, it's BASSLINE, and it's like the bass line for a song as opposed to the other way of spelling baseline. But at the Bassline, BASSLINE podcast, search that out on YouTube and subscribe to the channel, like all the episodes, share them all around, and please help me get that off the ground. Really, really would appreciate that. So all that being said, thank you for your patience. Let's get into this discussion with my very fascinating guest and friend, Steve Bennett. Now, Steve resides, as we mentioned, in Missouri. And before we get into some of this fascinating work that you've been doing that I mentioned in the introduction, Steve, just tell us about your COVID experience and give us a feeling of what it was like on the ground in Missouri. Because, of course, the experience, I'm sure, varies on a state-by-state basis. So what was going on in Missouri, and what was your thought process as the whole COVID event was unfurling before us?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jeremiah. Well, Missouri is known as the show me state. Don't tell me, show me. So we're a little bit stubborn out here. But it was a little bit of a mixed bag. You didn't have sort of the coastal elite drama, so to speak, of the real hardcore response. But there was, some of that going on. But, I'd point out the county that I'm in right now took a different tact, and especially one of the commissioners in particular was very courageous and bold and stood against locking down and, overarching policies, and protected the county somewhat. And that's, really part of the reason why I'm out here now. But just give props to him as an example of someone who in the moment, had the courage to kind of do the right thing. So I am in Missouri, but I grew up in Iowa. I think I'm just kind of a regular guy. I had a pretty good life, lots of ups and downs, just like everyone else. I had role model parents, big family, and we got to do all kinds of activities. So we were sort of Renaissance kids a little bit in hindsight. We really got a lot of exposure to different contexts. I went off to commercial art school. It was the Art Institute of Dallas, and that eventually opened doors to me for a career through the vocation of printing, of all things. And it kind of ages myself a little bit, but the printing presses at the time, the technology was closer to Gutenberg's innovation than it is to the technology of today. So, for hundreds of years, printing was a very traditional vocation, and that's where I started. What I didn't recognize at the time is, how that industry and vocation would be disrupted by technology, and that disruption would require disruptors and change agents who could take advantage of those changes. And I turned out to be one of those people. So I say my story, it has some resemblance to the 80s movie, the Michael J. Fox movie, The Secret of My Success, if you can remember that movie. I got an entry-level role in an international financial company in their print shop, of all places. It was the second lowest grade of a job you could get. But I started there and had the opportunity to, like I said, go through that digital transformation and disruption and kind of grow up my career. 25 years later, in multiple promotions, I had grown to be in leadership roles over actuary and underwriting projects and technical pricing, underwriting quality assurance for over $12 billion in gross written premium in North America. So it was a long, steady climb, and I learned a lot by some very intelligent people along the way about how to make sense of things and how to analyze risk, finance, business process, and so forth, and especially technology. And after a little more than 2 decades of doing that, I was just ready for a change of scenery. So I decided to go on my own and take kind of the innovation and analytics and digital transformation to local governments and nonprofits. Part of the influence for my interest there was my role model parents that were very involved, and they would volunteer. And then I also had history volunteering and appointed on different civic boards, park boards, public works advisory commission, where we worked on water and sewer infrastructure and financing. That part of my story, I feel like, has a little bit of a mirror or some similarities with Warner Mendenhall's story. A lot of his involvement started in that municipal government kind of space. So about that time, I had not been out on my own very long. I get a phone call from the Federal Reserve, and they were looking for someone to fill a key position for a high priority objective they had of improving advanced analytics. And that priority arose from the 2008 financial collapse, and they aimed to help economists and analysts, policy experts better see and understand their own data, quicker, ask and answer their own questions, basically, so they wouldn't be caught unaware like they were in 2008. So it was a really interesting project, a lot of fun. I worked with very intelligent people, learned a lot. It was gratifying work, felt like important work. Well, I completed that assignment at the district level and got a chance to go to a leadership exchange in Washington, D.C. And that was supposed to be a 6-month deal. They liked what I did. They asked me to stay, and I liked the work. So I began a full-time gig with the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in D.C., but I was still working remote. Loved my job. It was awesome. So kind of fast forward to about 2018, I'm living in a loft in Missouri. I'm working remotely. I'm getting physically and financially fit, feeling pretty good. I'm walking at least 5 miles a day, reading a lot, learning musical instruments, and I just kind of consider this my peak agency period. And no one's really totally in control of their life, but I've kind of hit a spot where, I kind of hit the the place you want to be. You can kind of do what you want to do when you want to do it. So it was a steady state and felt good, and I was really enjoying working on my own well-being and having capacity to then kind of invest in others, do volunteering and helping other people. But speaking of ups and downs, about that time, my doctor said the words no man ever wants to hear, and that was prostate cancer. And as alarming as that was to hear, it really started my education. And looking back, it was almost a blessing to cause my focus and attention on something. I may have missed a lot of the COVID narrative early on had I not been so dialed in around what was going on in my own body. So we just kind of at that time we just watched it, put it on surveillance. But by the spring of 2020, it showed some signs of growing. So we were starting to look at other options to treat it more aggressively. And so in a lot of ways, my COVID experience parallels and tracks my cancer experience. They were kind of on the same parallel tracks a little bit. So I'm coming to grips with that, and just dealing with it, and I'm okay. It's not what you want to do, but you deal with it. But this is the summer of COVID 2020, so a little bit of a roller coaster and tensions between the public health and my personal health. And I was never really frightened by the pandemic. I was generally polite and respectful with the masking, just didn't want to make waves. I thought I was all kind of a little bit silly, but to each their own, But in the middle of these challenges, my mom had gone down in Nevada. My folks winter out in Nevada, and so she'd had this mysterious kind of debilitating neuropathy for the last 10 years of her life. They never really could diagnose what happened to her. In hindsight, it's possibly a vaccine injury. We don't know, but she had this spell, and she was down, and it was crazy. I got a call from my dad, and he was a little distraught. He'd lost Mom. She had gone into the emergency room in Nevada, and they transported her to Arizona. The wires got crossed, and my dad went looking for my mom, and she was not to be found, and they couldn't tell her where she was. Couldn't tell my dad where she was. So it was a couple days tracking her down. So it was just a real clown show on the medical side there. But he eventually found her, and I went out to help him. So I'm driving through the Southwest. I drive out there from Missouri, and the rest stops are closed, hotels are closed for COVID. We're right in the thick of it. So, I drive as straight through as I can and get there, and it's COVID. She's in the hospital. The closest we can get to her is the lobby. So we hung out and just until it was time for her to eventually be released. And that day came, and we get another phone call. She's got COVID. So they're going to hold her for a while. And that kind of repeated. So it was really a long, extended time before we finally got her out of there. And when we got that last call that she was ready to go, we went to collect her, and they said, well, no, you can't have her. She has to be released to a transitional type facility. And I really put my foot down and said, hey, I'm here with my dad and my mom, and I'm not leaving. I can work remote. I'm staying with them until, she's either better and able to be self-sufficient, or they have to make another plan. So we basically had to kidnap my mom back from the hospital to get her with my dad. She got better, good enough, kind of back to her baseline, and so I went home, back to Missouri. They came home, and my mom did pass away later, and it was 2021 that she passed away. So, yeah, during all that time, we see the mandates coming, and I'm watching my cancer. I'm looking at the mandates, and at about the same time that I started my treatment, which is called a brachytherapy, they put radioactive seeds implanted. It takes 6, 8, 9 months that they're active. The mandates started to be announced. So I'm like, oh, I don't want this vaccine. And I'm not an expert, but I studied enough about the technology and enough about the potential interactions with the oncogenicity. And we know a lot more now, but I knew enough then that I didn't want it. I lived alone. By the way, I commissioned a blood test to demonstrate that I already had antibodies for COVID. I was under my cancer treatment. So the very last day before the vaccine mandate deadline, I went to my personal physician and requested an FDA-approved vaccine. And she couldn't give me one because they didn't have one. That led up to the end of my career as I knew it, and I think we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But that kind of gets us up into the heart of the COVID period.
Thank you so much for that overview. And now I would like to venture right into this really fascinating, truly fascinating work that you've done. Now, I've made the point that if we were to examine the harms that have been done since what they call the rollout of the COVID injections, we could point to several categories of evidence. And one of those categories would be the Substack of Professor Mark Crispin Miller, who has been a guest on this program, and he has maintained a very disciplined Substack whereby he keeps track of, as well as possible, the unusual deaths, the announcements in terms of health problems, and all these unusual things that we've observed in public life since the quote-unquote rollout. And I think that his Substack alone is a massive compilation of evidence. I mean, really, did this many athletes collapse or have heart attacks? Or did this many anchor people collapse live during a news broadcast? Did this many young people have cancer before? Did the term died suddenly get used this frequently? I mean, Mark Crispin Miller himself made the point on this very program that previously an obituary included cause of death as a standard feature of an obituary. Now you have obituaries where the cause of death isn't mentioned, or it's more frequently saying cause unknown or died suddenly. And as died suddenly became just too repetitive, eventually it was died unexpectedly. But you, using your IT expertise, have done some really fascinating work that I don't want to attempt to describe too much because I think you can do a better job of that than I have. But to actually use technology to do a complete examination of obituaries and turn it into a data set. Please describe what you were doing specifically in this project and what you uncovered through this unique work that you were doing.
Well, thank you for that, Jeremiah. I do appreciate the comments on that. Well, just to kind of set the stage on it a little bit, the words have meaning, and it's the only way that we encode and decode meaning with each other. So we're a little bit familiar with the idea of the institutional capture. But, I think of this thing I call the narrative capture, and we can talk about that a lot, but the meaning of words is kind of hijacked in some ways, and it's a real problem. We're not able to navigate our world. So, as I said before, I learned a lot from some really intelligent people about making organizational change, successful change. And in order to do that, you really have to understand reality. Not so much the way we wish it were, but the way it is. And so we have to deconstruct biases and blind spots and myths and legends. Sometimes things are held true that they're just absolutely not. And that also involves challenging big egos sometimes along the way. So then they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear and different things. So you have to think about different ways to get to the truth without asking people, what they think, or even sometimes what they say, because the meaning of the words can be, arbitrary. So I just got interested in ways to get to the truth, and meta-analysis is one way to do that. And I think of this work that I did somewhat as a meta-analysis, and it does have some IT, but I think the real, what the value or the pop that it has comes from kind of the data visualization. And I use Tableau Public for that, and I encourage anyone who has a inkling in data analysis or data viz, go play with that. We've talked about citizen scientists, and then I don't stop the shops, and it's a good idea. So that's how I see myself here. But I just went out and did a bunch of work going after. I was curious what the obituaries might say. I'd evaluated dozens, if not hundreds, of public data sets, and there's some different interesting insights, but nothing very conclusive, and it still kind of left me wanting. So, unsatisfied, I just thought about where else might I find information that could yield insights. And, I didn't want to rely on anything that could be controlled or contrived. And so I thought, what about obituaries? And I looked at the body of an obituary and the language and how it was described, and I just began to question if there might be a detectable change over time in that. And so I did a small sample, and I don't remember that being conclusive, but I remember it being interesting enough to keep going. So I so-called chopped wood for, a day or two, just on querying that data and repeating that process. I didn't have a very sophisticated way of retrieving that data, actually. But once I had it, then, configuring the data set and forming that so that I could report off it and create the visuals, then it yielded some pretty interesting patterns. Without going into those in a lot of detail, we just saw that we looked at the periods before COVID, we looked at the COVID period, and then the 3 years after COVID. And we just saw changes in like sleep, for example. And I believe I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, but the unexpected was something like a 36%, increase in the post-COVID period. So, and what that means, it doesn't, we're just looking at the words that were present in the obituary. So it's not conclusive. We're just looking at the way people describe their loved one and the death. So assuming that has a sort of unencumbered and natural language, if you will, approach, it should kind of be the same over time. So unless something is changing, the language we use to describe that thing should not change. And so that's what we were just kind of looking for. A lot of times I think about space exploration. A lot of times you can't observe the object directly, but you can observe the gravitational perturbations or the light obstruction or different things that tell you that planet's there. So this is an analysis kind of similar to that. Meta-analysis, what about the information can be informative. So that was the one exhibit that looked at the change in language. And I think that is an interesting exhibit, and it does cause conversation and additional questions. But I was still a little unsatisfied. I wanted to see if I could find something a little more direct. And I was curious if the vaccine wasn't mentioned in the obituaries. So I went out on a search, and that was a little more of a needle in a haystack type of exercise. But we did find 33 individuals where the vaccine is mentioned explicitly in their obituary. And, one could argue, again, it's not conclusive. It's not an official cause of death. These are written by family and friends. But in my estimation, for them to go so far as to mention it in the obituary is, significant enough for this purpose. They're proximate, and they have a degree of confidence, and some of them even elaborate a little bit on their illnesses that led to their death. So that's a relatively small number, but in my view, one person out of millions is a black box type of warning. you stop the shots if people are dying. And, we found 33. There was, since then, I've had conversations with one who lost a dear one, and a relatively certain that it was vaccine caused. It was a child. And the and others coerced them from putting, said that their GoFundMe wouldn't accept them, and all kinds of narrative control. So we know that there's some. We don't know how many. We know that some have been persuaded to not mention it. We don't know how many. But again, we line these up, and we've got different kind of categories of evidence that are stacking up. And so that's what that exercise was. And in that particular dashboard, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it provides a calculate in the 33 findings that we had where people mentioned the vaccine. We have a link to their obituary, so you can read it yourself. And we did a calculated figure for their years of life lost. And so there were some almost 500 years lost, life years lost from the 33 that we found.
Wow. Yeah, really fascinating stuff. And I think that, more of that kind of work and really starting to compile it could be very significant in this difficult task of waking people up through their shield of denial and wrong information that we've been subjected to. You also have a very fascinating situation. Actually, before I get into this next question, I just want to mention, of course, we love to hear from you, and I neglect to mention soon enough sometimes our phone number. So if you have a question for Steve Bennett and the fascinating work that he's been doing in terms of the linguistic forensics we just discussed, or any other aspect of our discussion here, please call 888-874-4888, 888-874-4888. Please keep that number secure in your phone so you have it handy to dial in and talk to us here at the Progressive Radio Network. We love to hear from you, and our astute callers always contribute something to this program, so don't hesitate to call. But let me ask you, Steve, about this rather dramatic situation you have, and of course tell us as much as you can, but no more than that in terms of this legal case you have, a lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken, against the Federal Reserve. How did that come to be, if you could tell us somewhat quickly?
Yeah, I do. And I do have a lawsuit, and it is it's a result of the vaccine mandate. And, it was a brutal experience. It was really, really tough to go through. And I know a lot of people experienced it, and I also acknowledge a lot of people have worse outcomes from the pandemic response than I did. I'm still alive. I'm not vaccine injured. I have my complaints, but yes, I was fired. And the problem that I had was the bait and switch. I didn't really want the vaccine, but I was willing to take the FDA-approved vaccine. I did have sufficient trust in the regulatory framework that if it truly made it through the rigors of the FDA approval, I was willing to go against my own preference and just comply. But when it came time for the needle in the arm, there were no FDA-approved vaccines. And I still to this day struggle why more people didn't see what was happening to them. But I pointed that out to them, and they gaslit me from all the way the rest of the way. So I saw the narrative capture, and these people that had been my friends at work, trusted partners, confidants, were Stepford wives all of a sudden, with the mantra, the safe and effective, the FDA approved. It was just like a switch had flipped, and they weren't having it. They weren't hearing it. And, I went through the internal appeals. I had a letter from my doctor that said, hey, he's got cancer. He's avoiding therapies. I agree with his decision. She wouldn't write me like an exemption letter, but she wrote me a letter of support, which they ignored. But the bottom line on that was when they decided to mandate an EUA product, yet insist that it was an FDA-approved product, one of us was going to violate our oath of office. I took an oath to the Constitution on my first day in the job. And, people should read it. If you're not familiar with it, read it. But there's a couple lines in there. We pledge our loyalty to the Constitution, not to the president, not to the director of the division at the Federal Reserve, and certainly not some junior in HR. And the language also talks about without purpose or evasion. So if you look up what the word evasion means, it's just shady. You can mince words, and you're not supposed to do that. That's what your oath says. I'm not going to mince words. I'm going to be clear. I'm going to be honest, forthright. It's going to be good faith. And the other part that stands out of the oath is to defend against enemies, foreign and domestic. And, sometimes that part will get thrown up into the hyperbole about who are domestic enemies. But we have experienced it. I will testify to that for my remaining days that we experienced capture in our own government. We don't know all the whys yet, but I know what happened, to me. And so I couldn't accept their deal, and I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to resign. I was going to make them fire me and answer for it. And, another thing to just think about too, this is a livelihood thing. I call it career. You can call it job, career. It's a livelihood. This is a one-of-a-kind job, a one-of-a-kind employer in a one-of-a-kind industry. And the rest of the world is got mandates dangling out there too. This is a socioeconomic death penalty, and they knew it. It's to humiliate, to take your dignity, your agency,
Yeah, I totally agree in terms of that aspect of it.
So I after I got fired, I looked for legal help. I could not find anyone to take the case. I've learned a lot about why. It's very difficult to sue the federal government. And most, I've talked to some good attorneys that say anyone who would take your case, you need to run from them because a good attorney shouldn't take your case because they're going to lose. So it's a real uphill battle, but I studied law the best I could. This last Monday was the 500th day of my case. I filed in the Western District of Missouri Federal Court. I have a friend. I call him a friend. He's a civil division attorney head of the civil division for the DOJ. That's my litigant opponent. And we're through email and dockets. And I took an FTCA approach, which theoretically waives the sovereign immunity of the court. And I've got multiple civil and constitutional counts in there. It was dismissed in the lower court, appealed to the Eighth Circuit. The DOJ, I'm going to say they threw a kitchen sink defense at it, and the Eighth Circuit has affirmed the lower court with a kind of a one-sentence affirmation. I think they're punting. There are a lot of problems with the government's case here. There's circuit splits, so the different circuits are coming up with different answers. One example is the DOJ is defending the federal. I also have the HHS named in my case, but the DOJ is defending two federal agencies in my case for the vaccine mandate, and they're amicus for Rolovich in the Ninth Circuit, who is the former Washington State football coach who was fired on a Title VII. It was a religious exemption for the vaccine mandate, but the government is supporting his case and fighting mine in two different circuits. They're not exactly identical, but they're similar enough. And in my case, actually administratively upstream back at the Fed, we were not allowed to even consider a religious exemption. So I went under the medical exemption. But, the net of it is still the same, due process and discrimination problems. Finally, one of the last kind of interesting notes on this case, in the last reply brief from the federal government, for the first time, they mentioned the executive order, Biden's executive order for federal employees mandate. And the problem with that is now they have to answer why they were not in civil contempt when they fired me during that injunction. There was a court injunction out of the Fifth Circuit against the vaccine mandate. So they stepped on their own feet, and they've got problems, but they're trying to throw it out on a technicality, basically. They're trying to ignore the FTCA. And the FTCA is interesting. And a couple of our famous cases in history came through the FTCA, part of the law. And the Japanese internment camp case was an FTCA case, as well was the Tuskegee Airmen case. That was an FTCA case also. So we'll see. My next step, I'm requesting a hearing en banc that will have the entire judge panel review the case. And then the only other step after that would be a petition to writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, which I never saw myself getting in court at all. I certainly never saw myself pursuing a case to the Supreme Court. But I think I have to, take it as far as I can. And, hopefully it'd be great to win. But at this point, getting reality committed to the archives, document this through the case, pleadings and so forth, permanently archived is a big part of the goal.
Excellent. Well, yeah, that's quite a controversial institution, you might say, the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, and the other argument is, well, the Fed's independent; they can do what they want. Well, then, why is the DOJ defending them, and why are they now leaning on a executive order of the executive branch? So they're cherry picking their status, and they do have some reputational risk through all that. One of the norms is their independence is honored and respected through the judicial system, the court system, and even in our culture. Say, well, we want to protect the independence of the Fed. And while I think that's a nice notion, I think those days have long passed. And it may not be as overt as you may see in other agencies. But I think this example right here, you can tell that there was not a clear independent reasoning at play. So they were definitely steered down this path by forces that we're still figuring out.
Right. Well, certainly good luck with that. And
thank you.
I would love, since you are such a regular attendee of our nightly Stop the Shots spaces and a contributor to that space, could you take a moment to invite this listening audience to join us on Stop the Shots? Because we do have a very astute listening audience here on the Progressive Radio Network. But I would love if this audience starts joining forces with our group, which is the Stop the Shots community that meets nightly on X. And by the way, if you're looking for me on X, it's at Earth Driver, EARTHDRIVER. That's named after my Freedom Funk mothership band called Earth Driver that I founded many years ago. But yeah, please look me up at Earth Driver. And I have the Stop the Shots community linked right there on my profile. So go to my profile, please follow me, and click on Stop the Shots and join the community with the push of a button. And then from there, if you would like to, we would love to have you join our nightly spaces. But Steve, can you give us an invite since you're a regular member of our group?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
we would love to have folks join Stop the Shots. I have to say that I give a lot of credit and just gratitude. Just thank you, Jeremiah, for coming up with that or being a part of that. I'm not sure how long it's been going on, honestly. I swerved in a while back and I listened for quite a while before I spoke. But to me, if you read anything about recovering from a PTSD type of experience, and that's the best explanation that I can see here. I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but I know that when I went through, shattered my assumptions of my world, and I had to reacclimate to what is this new reality? What's going on? The ground shook beneath my feet. It wasn't just my employer. It was also my government, and it was also my money. Everything that I thought I could count on to the end was now shaky all of a sudden. So it was a PTSD type event for me personally, and I was also very isolated and alone. So if you read anything about recovering from that, one of the things they talk about is being supported or understood by other like-minded people. And, I think in that sense, the Stop the Shots has just been a real lifesaver to some people. There's many people on there that have never spoken. I'd love to hear what they have to say. I'm sure it's making a difference in their ability to get back on track and make sense of their world. It's brought quite a diverse crowd, people from all kinds of, I would say, all over the world, really, but, political leanings, just backgrounds, urban, rural, and it's really interesting. It's a good faith conversation. It sometimes goes deep, sometimes it gets a little edgy, but it's real, it's authentic, and I think that's what people are needing more than ever. We've got contrived and narrative control, and this is a place where you can go and you can count on at least good faith. And you may not agree with everything you hear, but you also can grab a mic and participate in that sense-making process. So I highly recommend it. I'm trying to bring more friends to the venue, and so I encourage you, give it a shot. Pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. And I realized, and it's been sort of a recent revelation. It might seem obvious, but it's occurred to me in a new sort of way, and I've been stating this in our Stop the Shot spaces, and I'll state it here, which is just that the educating of the population around this subject of body sovereignty, around our health and the danger of vaccines, around what I now term the military medical industrial complex, people really becoming aware of these problems, engaging in this discussion is really, really important, because we can't just expect powerful people who are above us in a hierarchy to implement better laws and then we just go about our American business just lying along. We need to understand what's happening. We need to understand what's right for us and our families. We need to stand firm when there's a threat against our rights, against our health, against our sovereignty. So to me, the public being educated, the people, if you will, being as well educated as possible is as important as anything else. And I think we largely have a misconception that these powerful people can just hopefully do the right thing on our behalf sometimes. That's really not good enough. That's not going to cut it for our society. It's not going to cut it for the future of our society, specifically for our children and grandchildren. So, I don't think it's at all superfluous for people to get together, exchange ideas, and engage in the conversation. And so once again, we do ask you to join us on Stop the Shots. We're going to have a space tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's generally what time we go on the air. Sometimes Dr. Judy Mikovits will host a space beforehand, not today, but on Wednesdays. So sometimes we'll start a little bit later. Occasionally we'll start at 9:30, but in general, 9 p.m. Eastern time is when we start Stop the Shots. And we are pretty much out of time here. Unfortunately, I'm sad we don't get a chance to get to calls today, but I would like to ask you in these last 2 minutes that we have pretty much, just off the top of your head, Steve, what are some of the things that you would personally like to see achieved by the medical freedom movement? What should be our priorities at this critical moment?
Yeah, well, you're over the target. Education is really got to be number one. We want a paradigm shift, but people don't know what paradigm we're in. The medical, military, industrial complex is very real. Dr. O, I can talk about it a little bit, but you have to understand, the reality we're in. And so education is big. We all received a gift of clarity, or we're offered, if we receive it. So going forward, it's not a garden variety civic matter. It's a matter of life and death, and we have to treat it like that. Personally, I'm going to finish my case. Hopefully we win, but we're going to get it in the record. Working on that, and then I'm actually excited, Jeremiah, to be working on some technology in the AI and blockchain and quantum computing space. And I've got tension there because 45% of Americans would decline a national digital ID voluntarily. So while all this technology holds great promise of personalized medicine and so forth, it's going to require that major paradigm shift to more decentralization versus centralization, or it's lights out. They're going to automate and AI us out of any kind of discretionary involvement at all. And our kids will never know, and grandchildren will never know what it was like to live in a free country. So I'm excited to work on that tech and hopefully influence policy and how that gets used, bring ethics into that space. And then, I just say collaborating with others. A handful of us on the Stop the Shots just recently have kind of connected some dots of how we can work together, maybe to build some tools, maybe some databases that will memorialize and help citizen scientists and maybe even, actual policy researchers use some of this data we've curated and collected to make sense out of it. So maybe join data points that we've all kind of been dealing with on a point basis, where you can see the longitudinal story, the story about a person, their VAERS ID, their injury, what's happening now, and maybe it can be updated over time so that we have richer, more real-time, credible information about the stories involved. So, policy, just all these things really do tie back to education. So we had a lot more. We were in a much deeper hole than we could ever imagine. So the education piece is huge, and it's going to remain big for some time. Right. So hopefully these tools and ideas and discussions can lend
indeed
to that.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Steve Bennett. We are officially out of time, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on the Bassline, and keep up the great work. Everyone, please spread the word about this program. These issues have not been resolved. It wasn't a fad. We can't allow history to fall into the quicksand of history denial. And every little bit of support for this program is greatly, greatly appreciated. So, run over to Substack. Please subscribe for free. Save the date, October 26th. Join Stop the Shots, the Stop the Shots community. Please go on YouTube and subscribe. I think we're at like 56 subscribers. I wish with an audience like this, we just had 1,000 subscribers immediately. I think that's the way it should be. So please go to the Bassline, Bassline podcast on YouTube and subscribe immediately and like bomb the articles and share them all around. So have a great weekend, everyone. Really appreciate you tuning in. Stay strong. Keep fighting the good fight. See you next week. Peace and love.